Hey everyone, how's it going? It's Russell here, and we have some brand new comments from the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, about benefit cuts that are going to be hitting many Canadians in the next couple of weeks, and how they're all inside of something called Bill C-30, the Budget Implementation Act, that the Liberals are trying very hard to get passed by the deadline of next Wednesday. Now, inside of this, we also have other political parties who are calling out the Liberals, saying that they believe that the Liberals are creating a false narrative, potentially for people who aren't following this story as closely, so that the Liberals end up looking like the good guys and other people end up taking the blame. But is this actually true? Well, in today's video, we're going to cover all of this, from Trudeau's statements to all of the criticisms of Trudeau and what is actually going to happen going forward. But before we do, make sure to check out the links in the description. With Wealthsimple, you can get $25 free when you start trading stocks here in Canada, and with Newton, you can get $25 in crypto when you buy your first $100 of any crypto on the Newton platform. So check that out, or check out the link in the description for the Canada Money Mastery course, 40% off with coupon code GROW. Okay, let's go and dive directly in here to Justin Trudeau's comments that were just made this morning.
Finally, this morning, I want to address some recent developments in the House of Commons. The work we do in Parliament matters, and it matters because it affects you, your family, and your communities. In the House right now, we're working to extend support that millions of Canadians need to get through the final stretch of this pandemic, from the wage subsidy to small business loans to the sickness benefit. Let's be clear. These benefits will end in a few weeks if the Conservative Party and the opposition parties continue to obstruct our efforts to pass legislation. Frankly, I don't think anyone is surprised to see the Conservative Party standing in the way, but it's disappointing to see the NDP and the Bloc both join in these political games. This is progressive legislation and a progressive agenda that will help Canadians. There's important work to be done.
We're going to get to more of Trudeau's comments here in a second, but let's provide a little bit of context as to what's going on here. He's saying that they're working to pass this bill that's going to extend many different benefits. Oddly, he doesn't include CRB in that list, but that is included inside of this bill that they're trying to get passed. Now, he says that the Conservatives and the Bloc Québécois and the NDP, well, they're all playing political games in the Liberals' eyes, and not allowing this legislation to pass through. But this is a little bit facetious when you take a closer look at what's actually going on. Since the Liberal government is a minority government right now, they actually need to get the support of some opposition parties in order to pass a bill officially. And they're having a lot of trouble getting that support right now, but the reason that they're not able to get that support is different for every single party. You see, the NDP, they're largely in support of much of this bill, but there's one problem with it. You might remember that the CRB inside of this budget, well, it's going to be extended until September for people who have been applying since the beginning, but there's also going to be a reduction of that CRB amount to the tune of $800 per month, reduced from the previous rate, bringing it down to $1,200 per month. Now, you see, the NDP, they're not a fan of this, and they actually tried to get amendments passed in committee stage, and they're trying to get changes made right now when they're in report stage in the House of Commons. But essentially, the Liberal government isn't really acknowledging that the NDP want to have this change made. Instead, they're providing the NDP with the sort of ultimatum that, hey, you can vote to pass this, and if you don't vote to pass this, are you essentially saying that you want benefits to be cut from Canadians? Because that's what will happen if this bill doesn't pass. We'll touch on that again in a minute, but for the Conservatives, they're also not in support of this bill, but for a different reason. You see, Bill C-30, it doesn't just include what we've been talking about, these benefits and these extensions. No, this is actually a 700-plus page bill with a number of different programs and changes and ideas that the Liberals are hoping to pass through, that many of which the Conservatives don't actually support. The Conservatives are making their voices heard on these programs and these changes that they don't actually want to see, but the Liberals aren't too big of a fan of that because it delays this whole process. Now, at the beginning of the week, the Liberals passed something called a time allocation, limiting the amount of debate that they can possibly have on this Bill C-30, so we're going to have to see if this actually expedites the whole bill passing process. But now let's get back to Trudeau himself, where he sort of insinuates that the Liberal Party is the only party that is actually looking out for Canadians. Let's listen in.
In other words, we're working on what matters to you. Unfortunately, not all parties in the House of Commons have the same priorities. Not all parties are focused on having your back. Instead of finding real solutions to real challenges Canadians face, the Conservative Party is playing political games. Just yesterday, they put forward a crass political attack on a man who has spent a lifetime serving his country as a police officer, as a decorated soldier who served 3 tours in Afghanistan, and now serves as Minister of National Defence.
Trudeau is essentially insinuating that the Liberals are the only ones that are working to get things done for Canadians in the House of Commons, and he brings up a motion that was presented by the Conservatives just yesterday that actually successfully passed. But what's this all about? And this is important in the context of Bill C-30 because it's something that they have been spending a lot of time on in the House of Commons, potentially delaying the Bill C-30 debate. Now, to get you caught up if you haven't been following this story, over the past number of months, the Minister of National Defence, who oversees the Canadian Armed Forces, has been taking a huge amount of criticism all about a potential sexual misconduct and potential cover-up of that sexual misconduct within the highest ranks of the Canadian Armed Forces. Slowly over time, more and more information has leaked out that's made this Minister of National Defence look worse and worse and more complicit in this potential sexual misconduct cover-up within the Canadian Armed Forces, and it all sort of came to a head yesterday when the Conservatives put forward a motion to censor the Minister of National Defence. Now, when they say censor, that doesn't mean like they won't allow him to talk. It essentially is just the House of Commons expressing their disdain or their disappointment for his conduct as of recent months. But what you wouldn't know if you just listened to Trudeau's comments here is that it's not just the Conservatives trying to play political games and use delay tactics by ruining this defense minister's career, as Justin Trudeau sort of framed it here, and you can see that in the votes here on this motion. Essentially, everyone in the House of Commons except for the Liberals voted in favor of this formal expression of disappointment around this minister and his conduct. In reality, the Bloc Québécois, the NDP, and the Conservatives all voted in favor of this motion, which makes it a little bit interesting to see Trudeau framing this as a very liberal versus conservative issue, with the Conservatives trying to delay them passing these bills. And along the same lines, this is directly about the Canada benefits that are about to be cut. The NDP are calling out the Liberals for sort of falsely framing the two options that we have. Let me show you what I'm talking about.
Madam Speaker, ever since the Liberals announced a significant cut to the Canada Recovery Benefit in their budget, New Democrats have been pushing back against that cut and challenging the government to undo it. The answer they give in the House is completely disingenuous. They pretend there's a choice between voting for their budget and voting for the cuts, or voting against the budget and voting against extending the benefit. They know there's a third option, to extend the benefit and maintain the current benefit level. I'm just looking for some honesty here. Will the government acknowledge that that's an option and finally explain why they're choosing instead to cut the budgets of Canadians who are struggling to make ends meet?
So we're hearing the NDP say the same sort of thing that I've been saying on the channel over the past week, that we actually haven't heard the reason why the Liberal government wants to lower this benefit. We haven't heard any response. Whenever they've been asked this question, they merely sort of try to make it a yes or no statement. Do you want to extend benefits or do you not want to extend benefits? Not recognizing that there is a third option here. But are we going to get a different response this time? Well, let's listen into the Minister of Employment, Carla Qualtrough, and her response to Daniel Blakey's question.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. The CRB is part of a comprehensive suite of emergency and recovery measures to support Canadian workers and businesses. Through the CRB, if opposition parties support C-30, Canadians could have access to up to 50 weeks of benefits. They could also have access to more flexible EI benefits. Businesses could continue to have access to the wage subsidy, and we could help Canadians re-enter the labor market by creating 500,000 new training and work opportunities and launching the Canada Recovery Hiring Program. We will continue to do whatever it takes, Madam Speaker, but we implore opposition parties to help us and put C-30 through. Thank you.
And again, we don't really get an answer here as to why these benefit cuts are being made by the Liberals, but we do get some good points here from Carla Qualtrough saying if we don't pass Bill C-30, well, there's going to be not just the CRB that essentially runs out for many Canadians, it'll also be the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, certain leniency in the EI program, as well as many other benefits, including business supports. And if we don't pass Bill C-30, it could have a negative impact on a lot of Canadians. If you've watched my channel before, you know that I try my best to stay right down the middle so that you can make what you will of this information, so I'll provide the critique that the opposition parties would have to the Liberals. Essentially, what they're saying is, hey, we wouldn't be in this mess if it wasn't for you, the Liberals. If you were to bring in the budget earlier so we would have had more time to debate it and study it before this deadline, well, then we wouldn't be in this situation. The Conservatives, Bloc Québécois, and NDP might also bring up the fact that instead of pushing through this 700-page bill, if you really wanted to support Canadians, you would have have put through smaller bills that would have been easier to pass in order to extend these supports instead of trying to ram everything through all at once, potentially putting us up against this timeline. The opposition parties might also bring up the trend that we've been seeing from the Liberals, waiting until the last possible moment to bring forward these bills that Canadian supports depend on in order to pass their legislation. We've seen this with Bill C-4, the one that brought the CRB into existence, Bill C-14, the Economic Implementation Act, and now again with Bill C-30, essentially the Liberals waiting until the last moment and forcing the other parties to either get on board or look like the bad guy. Today in the House of Commons, Chrystia Freeland wasn't present, but whenever they're not present, they put forward their parliamentary secretaries to respond to questions in their stead. And for Chrystia Freeland, this is someone named Sean Fraser, who reportedly had a big part of drafting the most recent budget, and here he gets a little bit heated when the Conservatives press him on some important points.
The fact that Liberals are doing absolutely nothing to make life more affordable because they just want to tax, tax, tax. When will we see a credible plan to create jobs, Madam Speaker? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, with great respect, if the honourable member is concerned with getting supports to Canadians who are experiencing financial need as a result of the pandemic, he should get out of the way, stop obstructing the budget that includes supports that are going to help vulnerable Canadians, that's going to put more money in the pockets of affected workers, that's creating incentives for businesses to bring more workers back on the payroll and ensure people can keep a roof over their head and food on the table. The reality is, from the beginning of this pandemic, we have had their backs. The Conservatives have tried to obstruct every step of the way. We won't have it, and we will be there for Canadians no matter what it takes, as long as it takes.
So you can see here things are starting to get a little bit heated, with the Liberals pointing out that the Conservatives are playing delay games, not allowing Bill C-30 to be debated in its entirety, potentially putting it at risk to not be passed at all by the time that we reach this Wednesday update. And that's not entirely without merit, because back with Bill C-14, the Fall Economic Update Implementation Act, well, the Conservatives did delay the passage of that for months, so both of these parties have legitimate concerns with the other. And as for the actual debate that's gone on about Bill C-30, the Budget Implementation Act, you might remember from a previous video that because of the gag order, or the time allocation that was passed earlier in this week, they only have 5 hours left of debate at report stage, which is the second last phase, and 5 hours left at third reading, which is the last phase in the House of Commons for this bill. Now, as of right now, as of this morning, Friday morning, they've, in this report stage, the one they're in currently, well, they've used 4 of those hours. So after one more hour of Bill C-30 debate, it's going to be put to a vote to see if it gets past this this committee report phase. Then it moves on to third reading, at which time they have 5 more hours of debate before they're forced, because of this time allocation, to have this bill put to a final vote. So we're definitely going to be keeping our eyes open. Certainly things won't be finalized today as of Friday, and we're going to have to see if on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday things actually get done, if amendments are added, or if this bill passes in its current state, or if it flops and fails entirely, pushing up against that Wednesday deadline. If all of these hours of debate actually happen and we see a final vote, well, then there's also the question on whether or not this bill will get enough support from the opposition parties. Certainly, if it's only the Liberals trying to pass this bill and nobody else supports it, well, then it wouldn't pass. But because of a previous vote this week, we believe that the Bloc Québécois were going to vote alongside the Liberals to get this bill passed. But now that might not be the case based on Trudeau's comments. You might remember during that press conference, he said that the Bloc, the NDP, and the Conservatives are using delay tactics and political gains or games. So it's interesting to see that maybe this alliance that we thought was there between the Liberals and the Bloc Québécois, well, that might not exist, putting the whole bill in that vote in question. It's just such a messed up situation with so many different angles, and I'm doing my best here to provide you with all of these angles so that you can think about it yourself and make up your own mind on what you think should be done. Obviously, it's pretty complex, but let me know down there in the description what you think of all of this. And while you're down there, make sure to check out the links in the description where you can open up investing accounts, or, and I'd recommend this, check out the Canada Money Mastery Program, 40% off with coupon code GROW at checkout. You get lifetime access to the entire course. We cover everything about money you should have been taught in high school, how to invest, how to save more, how to earn more, all of that good stuff. Check out that link, see if it's a good fit for you. If it is, I'll see you in there. But with all of that said, thank you so much for watching, everybody. I really hope this video has helped you out at least a little bit, and I'll see you next time.